The massive ship of Commander Vex cut through space like a knife. Its dark metal shell reflected no light, only absorbing the distant stars into its pitch-black surface. Inside, Vex stood tall, his scaled skin catching the red lights of the command room. He looked out at the small planet below them, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Another payment day," he said, his voice deep and rough. The crew around him, all crawl like him, nodded in agreement. Their thick, armored bodies moved with purpose around the bridge. The crawl were feared across all known space. They had evolved on a world that would kill most beings in minutes, gravity that would crush bones, air that would burn lungs, and creatures that sought everything else as food. The crawl had not just survived there. They had become the top hunters. "Sir, the planet's leaders are asking for more time," said one of the officers. Vex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Time? Did our world give us time when we were young? Did the acid rains wait? Did the ground beasts show mercy?" He touched a control panel. "Tell them they have 1 day. Then we take double." This was how things worked in the Galactic Union. The crawl provided protection, and everyone else paid. No one dared to stand against them. The other races were soft, evolved on gentle worlds with plenty of food and little danger. They had never needed to become strong. The crawl had needed nothing else. On the planet below, beings looked up with fear as the shadow of the crawl ship blocked their sun. Later, in the great meeting hall of the Galactic Union, leaders from 100 worlds gathered. The hall was built to fit all sizes of beings, from the tiny myth who stood only as tall as a crawl's knee, to the long-bodied fell who coiled around special posts. At the center table sat the 7 head counselors, and at their side, always, stood a crawl guard. "The protection rates have gone up again," said Counselor Benny, his blue skin flushing darker with anger. "My people cannot pay more." The crawl guard took 1 step forward. Just one. Benny shrank back in his seat. "Perhaps," said the lead counselor, "we can discuss better collection methods instead." This was the way of things. Had been for 200 years. The crawl were simply too strong, too tough, too fearsome to challenge. Evolution had made them perfect warriors, and the rest of the galaxy had no choice but to live under their shadow. Until the day a small ship appeared at the edge of known space. "Unknown vessel approaching Union Station 6, reported a sensor operator on the station. The station commander, a crawl named Grak, barely looked up from his meal. "Scan it. Probably just traders from the outer systems." "Sir," scan shows, "it's not in our records. New design, and the beings inside." The operator paused, checking readings again. "They appear to be from a high-gravity world. Possibly a death world." Grak stopped eating. Nothing from a death world had ever been encountered except the crawl themselves. It was impossible. No other species could evolve in such conditions and develop space travel. "Bring them in," he ordered. "I want to see these beings myself." The small ship docked with perfect precision. The station crew gathered, curious but cautious. The airlock opened, and out stepped creatures that walked on 2 legs. They had no scales, no natural armor. They looked soft, with strange fur on top of their heads. "Greetings," said the first one, smiling with flat teeth. "We are humans, from Earth. We come seeking friendship and trade." Grak studied them with growing confusion. His scanner showed impossible readings: high muscle density, efficient oxygen use, radiation resistance. These humans had indeed evolved on a world much like the crawl homeworld, perhaps even harsher in some ways. For the first time in his life, Grak felt something strange in his chest. Was it worry? He needed to report this to Commander Vex immediately. The age of unchallenged crawl dominance was about to end. Jack stepped onto the station with calm eyes and a straight back. He had been chosen to lead this first contact because he never showed fear. Behind him came 4 other humans, including Tom, a security officer with quick hands and sharp eyes. "Welcome to Union Station 6, said a tall blue alien with 4 arms. "I am Lori, assistant to the station council. We rarely get visitors from unexplored sectors. Jack smiled and extended his hand, then remembered the briefing. Not all species shook hands. He lowered it smoothly. Thank you for allowing us to dock. Earth is eager to establish friendly relations with the Galactic Union. Whispers spread through the gathered aliens. Most had never seen humans before. They looked so strange. No tentacles, no extra limbs, no bright colors or natural weapons. Yet they moved with a confidence that seemed odd for such plain-looking creatures. Grak watched from the back of the room, his yellow eyes never leaving the humans. He had sent his report to Commander Vex, who was now on his way to the station. Something about these humans bothered him deeply. The welcome ceremony will begin in 1 hour, Lori explained, leading the humans toward their quarters. Many important representatives wish to meet you. As they walked through the station, Jack noticed how other beings moved aside, eyes down, when Crawl passed by. The fear was obvious. He made mental notes of everything. The technology level, the species diversity, the power structure. Earth needed this information to navigate this new political reality. In their private room, Tom checked for listening devices while the others unpacked. Clear, he said quietly. What do you think, Jack? The Crawl run everything through fear, Jack replied. Did you see how everyone reacts to them? This isn't an equal alliance. It's more like an empire. Our scans show they're strong, but not unbeatable, Tom said. Similar muscle density to humans, better natural armor, but slower metabolism. Jack nodded. Let's be respectful, but not submissive. We're here as equals. The welcome ceremony was held in a large hall. Representatives from 20 species sat in tiered seats around a center platform. When the humans entered, curious murmurs filled the room. Many had expected creatures more like the Crawl, visibly dangerous, clearly evolved for combat. Instead, they saw beings that looked almost fragile compared to the scaled and armored Crawl. A tall Crawl with red markings on his scales stepped forward. I am Commander Vex of the Protection Fleet. You claim to be from a high-gravity, high-radiation world. Yet you look soft. He spoke the last word like an insult. Jack met his gaze evenly. Appearances can be misleading, Commander. Earth has shaped us in ways that aren't obvious at first glance. Vex circled Jack, studying him. Your muscles seem dense enough, but where is your natural armor? How did your kind survive predators? We became the predators, Jack said simply. Not through armor, but through endurance and intelligence. Vex made a dismissive sound. Intelligence is common. Strength is rare. Both are valuable, Jack replied. The tension in the room grew. Other species watched this exchange with growing interest. No one spoke to the Crawl this way, as equals. Then it happened. A Crawl guard stepped deliberately into Tom's space, bumping him hard. It was a clear provocation, expected to make the human stumble or cower. Instead, Tom's reflexes activated. He didn't fall. He didn't even step back. His body automatically adjusted, feet spreading slightly for balance, hands coming up just enough to be ready. It was a subtle movement, trained into him through years of combat preparation. The Crawl guard looked surprised. He tried again, moving faster this time. Tom sidestepped with a quickness that startled everyone watching. The Crawl's momentum carried him forward, making him appear clumsy. A gasp went through the crowd. The Crawl were never outmaneuvered physically. Never. Vex's eyes narrowed to slits. Interesting reflexes for a diplomatic team. We believe diplomats should be prepared for all situations, Jack said calmly. Just as I'm sure your diplomats are. Later, as the humans retired to their quarters, rumors spread throughout the station. The newcomers had stood their ground against the Crawl. They moved with unusual speed. They showed no fear. And Commander Vex was not pleased. Find out everything about these humans, he ordered his intelligence officer. Their planet, their biology, their weapons. Everything. For the first time in centuries, the Crawl faced a species that might be their equal, and that made them very, very dangerous in Vex's eyes. 3 days passed. More human ships arrived at the station. Each brought experts in different fields: scientists, engineers, and diplomats. The other alien species watched with growing interest as the humans moved about the station with ease, adapting quickly to the different gravity sections and unusual atmospheres. Lori, the blue-skinned assistant, found herself assigned to guide the humans. At first, she had been nervous, but now she enjoyed their company. Unlike the Crawl, they asked questions about her species and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. "Your people evolved underwater?" Jack asked as they walked toward the meeting hall. "Yes, in deep ocean trenches," Lori explained. "We only came to land a few thousand years ago." "That explains your beautiful skin color," Jack said. "Probably developed to blend with deep waters." Lori's skin darkened slightly, her species' way of showing pleasure at a compliment. No one had ever suggested her blue coloring was beautiful before. Inside the main command center, Commander Vex reviewed the reports on the humans with growing concern. "They've requested full membership in the Galactic Union," his officer reported. "Denied," Vex said immediately. "Sir, the Council is considering their request. Many representatives seem supportive." Vex slammed his scaled fist on the table. "They've been here less than a week. Do they think they can simply walk in and claim equal status with species who have been part of the Union for centuries?" The officer hesitated. "There's more, sir. Their biology scans show some unusual traits. Their endurance exceeds Crawl standards by 40%. Their thermal adaptation range is wider. And their group coordination is exceptional." Vex stood and walked to the viewing window, looking out at the latest human ship to dock. It was larger than the first, sleek and powerful looking. "They're challenging us without declaring a challenge," he said quietly. "The other species see it. That's why they support the humans. They hope these newcomers will weaken our position." He turned suddenly. "Call a public assembly. Today." The great assembly hall filled quickly as word spread of Vex's unusual summons. All species with representatives on the station attended, curious about what would happen. The humans sat together in the front row, calm but alert. Vex entered last, his red-marked scales gleaming under the lights. He walked directly to the center platform and surveyed the crowd. "For 2 centuries, the Crawl have provided protection to the Galactic Union," he began, his voice carrying easily through the large space. "Our strength has kept pirates and hostile forces away from your trade routes and colonies." Murmurs spread through the crowd. This was the standard justification for the protection fees all planets paid. Now new beings arrived claiming to be our equals. Vex turned his yellow eyes to Jack. "Humans wish to join the Union as full members, with all rights and privileges. But what do they offer? What have they proven?" Jack watched calmly, not responding to the obvious provocation. In Crawl tradition, one must prove worthiness through action, not words, Vex continued. "Therefore, I propose a challenge." The room went completely silent. Crawl challenges were legendary and often fatal. "A combat trial," Vex said, smiling to show his sharp teeth, "between myself and the human leader, to test if humans truly belong among us as equals." Jack stood slowly. All eyes turned to him. "The Crawl aren't the only ones with combat traditions," he said, his voice steady. "But we prefer to prove ourselves through cooperation, not conflict." "Are you refusing?" Vex asked, triumph in his voice. "I'm suggesting an alternative, a survival challenge instead of combat. Something that tests all our abilities, not just strength." Vex considered this for a moment. "Explain." "A trial on neutral ground. The abandoned mining asteroid near this station. Variable gravity, environmental hazards, limited resources. First one to reach the central control room wins." A buzz of conversation broke out. This was unexpected. "And if I win?" Vex asked. Humans will withdraw our request for full membership and accept your authority, Jack said. But if I win, you support our membership and end the protection fees for all worlds. Gasps echoed through the hall. No one had ever dared challenge the fees directly. Vex's eyes narrowed, but he was trapped. To refuse now would show weakness. I accept, he said finally. 3 days from now, we will see if humans truly belong among the stars, or if they should have stayed on their little death world. As the crowd dispersed, Lori hurried to Jack's side. Do you know what you've done? She whispered. No one has ever beaten a crawl in such a challenge. Jack smiled slightly. There's always a first time. News of the challenge spread through the station like wildfire. Nobody talked about anything else. Many species secretly hoped the human would win, but none believed it possible. The crawl had never lost a challenge. In the human quarters, Jack trained quietly. He ran laps in the station's exercise ring, practiced climbing in the variable gravity chambers, and studied maps of the asteroid where the challenge would take place. Tom watched him with worried eyes. Vex is twice your size. His scales can stop small weapons. Jack nodded as he stretched his muscles. I'm not planning to fight him directly. This isn't about who's stronger. Then what is it about? Endurance, adaptation, problem solving, Jack said. The things that made humans survive on Earth. Meanwhile, Lori had been researching human biology. As a scientist, she found the humans fascinating. They had evolved very differently from the crawl, despite coming from similar harsh worlds. She slipped into the human quarters, looking nervous. I have information that might help you, she whispered to Jack. But if the crawl find out I'm helping you. They won't, Jack promised. What did you learn? Lori handed him a small data device. Crawl biology has a weakness. Their powerful muscles burn energy very quickly. They evolved as sprint hunters, extreme bursts of speed and strength, followed by long rest periods. Jack's eyes lit up with understanding. So in a prolonged challenge, they tire, Lori confirmed. Their bodies aren't built for endurance. Yours is. This explains their empire, Jack said thoughtfully. Quick, overwhelming displays of force. But they couldn't maintain a long war. Tom studied the data. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Our cooling system, sweating, lets us regulate temperature better than almost any species. And your cooperative instincts, Lori added. Crawl are naturally solitary. They work together only under strict hierarchies. Humans naturally form teams and help each other, even at personal cost. Jack nodded slowly. So we don't beat them at their game. We play our own. On the other side of the station, Commander Vex prepared differently. He tested his strength against power machines, breaking several. He practiced with weapons, though they weren't allowed in the challenge. His focus was entirely on dominating his opponent quickly. The human is training strangely, reported his intelligence officer. Running long distances, practicing in hot and cold chambers, studying puzzle systems. Vex laughed. Let him waste time on tricks. Strength always wins. He flexed his clawed hand. On the asteroid, he will learn what it truly means to face a Deathworlder. The day before the challenge, the council called both competitors for final instructions. The rules are simple, said the head counselor. You will both start at opposite airlocks of the mining asteroid. The first to reach the central control room wins. No weapons allowed, but you may use any tools or equipment you find inside. Emergency beacons are provided in case of life-threatening danger. Vex snorted. I won't need mine. Jack simply nodded. The station will broadcast the challenge to all Union worlds, the counselor continued. This event has attracted unprecedented interest. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about Earth, about why he was here. Humans had almost destroyed themselves many times before finally uniting. They had learned the hard way that cooperation achieved more than domination. Now they had a chance to bring that lesson to the stars. His communicator beeped softly, a message from Lori. The asteroid environment changes rapidly. Temperature swings of 200 degrees between sunlight and shadow. Prepare for extremes. Jack smiled. Even here, far from Earth, he was finding allies. That was humanity's true strength. Morning came. Jack suited up in the standard-issue environment suit provided for the challenge. It was designed to offer basic protection while still testing the competitor's natural abilities. As he stepped toward the transport shuttle, Tom clasped his shoulder. "Remember," Tom said quietly, "Crawl never developed endurance because they never needed to chase anything. Everything ran from them." Jack nodded. Until now. The asteroid loomed before them, a dark chunk of rock pitted with old mining tunnels. Jack's shuttle approached one airlock while Vex's headed to the opposite side. Throughout the Galactic Union, billions of beings watched their screens, eager to see the outcome of this historic challenge. Jack stepped through the airlock and into the asteroid. Immediately, he felt the strange, uneven gravity pulling at him. The asteroid had been mined unevenly, creating pockets where gravity shifted unexpectedly. His training in the variable gravity chambers would help him here. The tunnels were dark, lit only by emergency lights that cast long shadows. Jack moved carefully but steadily, using the map he had memorized. The central control room was deep inside, through a maze of passages that twisted and turned unpredictably. On the other side, Vex charged forward with confidence. His powerful legs propelled him through the tunnels at great speed. He knew the Crawl reputation rode on his performance today. If he failed, centuries of dominance might end. That was unacceptable. Jack entered a large cavern where the temperature suddenly dropped. His breath fogged before him. This must be one of the shadow zones Lori had mentioned, where no sunlight had reached for decades. The cold bit through his suit, but he kept moving. Humans had survived ice ages on Earth. This was manageable. He noticed mining equipment scattered around, left behind when the asteroid was abandoned. Some tools might be useful. He picked up a small pry bar and continued. Vex reached a narrow passage blocked by fallen rocks. With a growl, he began throwing the heavy stones aside, his muscles training with each effort. The crawlway was direct, through obstacles, not around them. He cleared the path quickly, but sweat beaded on his scales. He was burning energy fast. The asteroid trembled slightly. The structure was unstable after years of mining. Both competitors paused, feeling the vibration through their feet, then continued their journeys. Jack entered a section where the gravity suddenly increased. His body felt 3 times heavier, making each step an effort. He slowed but did not stop. Earth's gravity had prepared him for this. He pushed forward methodically, controlling his breathing to conserve energy. Meanwhile, Vex encountered a section where intense heat radiated from the walls. This part of the asteroid faced the sun directly. The temperature was almost unbearable, even for his tough scales. He rushed through, wanting to escape the heat quickly. His heart pounded with the effort. Jack found himself at a junction. 3 tunnels stretched before him, but his memorized map showed only 2. The mining company must have dug a new tunnel before abandoning the asteroid. He had to decide quickly which way to go. He remembered something from his training. In mines, airflow matters. He dampened his finger and held it up, feeling for the faintest breeze. The right tunnel had the strongest air current, which likely led to a larger space, possibly the central control room. He took that path. Vex was gaining ground, his powerful legs carrying him through the tunnels faster than Jack could move. But the continuous exertion was taking its toll. His breathing became heavier, his movements less precise. Still, he pushed on. The human could not be allowed to win. They were both getting closer to the center. The tunnels began to look more finished, with metal supports and proper lighting. The central control room was near. Then disaster struck. As Vex rounded a corner, his heavy footsteps triggered a collapse. The ceiling crashed down, blocking the passage completely. Dust filled the air. Vex roared in frustration, then began tearing at the fallen rocks. Jack heard the collapse from a different tunnel. He paused, considering. The sound had come from ahead and to his right, near where his path and Vex's would eventually meet. He could continue toward the control room, ignoring what had happened. That would be the direct path to victory. But something else tugged at him, a deeper instinct that had helped humans survive on Earth. No one left another person in danger, even an enemy. It was the cooperative impulse that Lori had mentioned. Jack changed direction, following the sound of the collapse. When he reached the pile of rubble, he could hear Vex on the other side, still trying to break through. "Vex," he called. "Are you injured?" A surprised pause. Then, "I need no human help." Jack ignored the hostility. The more we disturb these rocks, the worse the collapse could get. There's another way around. Follow my voice. There was a moment of silence. Jack knew what Vex was thinking. In his position, the crawl would have left an opponent to die. "Why would you help me?" Vex finally asked. "Because that's what humans do," Jack answered simply. After guiding Vex to a side tunnel that connected with his path, Jack had a choice. He could race ahead, taking advantage of the time Vex had lost. Victory was within reach, yet he found himself waiting until the crawl commander appeared, covered in rock dust, but otherwise unharmed. Vex emerged from the tunnel, his yellow eyes narrowing as he saw Jack. "You waited," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "The challenge isn't over," Jack replied. "Winning because you got trapped wouldn't prove anything about humans." Vex studied the human with new interest. "On my world, such behavior would be seen as weakness. On mine, it's seen as strength," Jack said. "Now, shall we continue?" They moved forward together, each keeping a wary distance from the other. The central control room was close now. Both could sense it. The tunnels had become wider, more structured. "Why did your kind leave your world?" Vex asked suddenly as they walked. "If Earth is as harsh as you claim, why venture into space?" Jack considered the question. Curiosity, mostly, of desire to see what's beyond our own skies, to meet others and learn from them, not to conquer. We tried conquering each other for thousands of years. It never brought lasting peace. Vex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Peace is overrated. The strong should rule the weak. It's the natural order." "Natural doesn't always mean best," Jack replied. "Evolution is about adaptation, not just strength." Before Vex could respond, the asteroid shook violently. This wasn't a small tremor like before. The entire structure seemed to shift. Warning lights flashed in the tunnel. A computerized voice echoed through the passages. "Warning. Structural integrity compromised. Major collapse imminent. Evacuate immediately." Jack and Vex exchanged a quick glance. The challenge had just become deadly serious. "The control room is closest," Jack said, checking his mental map. "We can trigger the emergency systems from there." They ran now, all thoughts of competition forgotten. The asteroid continued to shake, more violently with each passing minute. Pieces of ceiling fell around them. The old mining structure was finally giving way after years of neglect. They rounded a corner and saw it, the central control room door, sealed shut. A simple keypad secured it. Vex rushed forward and tried to force the door, but even his strength couldn't break the heavy metal. "We need the code," Jack said, examining the keypad. "There's no time," Vex growled, striking the door again. Jack studied the worn keys. Some were more used than others, their surfaces shiny from repeated pressing. A trick he'd learned on Earth: look for the most used buttons to narrow down code possibilities. With the asteroid shaking around them, Jack tried a combination. Failed. Another. Failed again. The rumbling grew worse. "Move aside," Vex ordered. "I'll tear out the entire control panel." "Wait," Jack said. "One more try." He entered another sequence, thinking of standard mining protocols he'd studied. The light turned green. The door slid open. They rushed inside to find a large room filled with control stations. Most were dark after years of disuse, but emergency systems remained powered. Jack ran to the main console while Vex checked the structural integrity displays. "The asteroid's breaking apart," Vex reported. "We have minutes at most." Jack worked quickly, fingers flying over the old controls. "I'm activating the emergency beacon and stabilization systems." The room shook violently. A support beam crashed down, missing them by inches. "It's not working," Jack said. "The stabilizers are too damaged." "Then we failed," Vex stated flatly. "No," Jack replied, still typing. "I can reroute emergency power to the communication array. We can warn the station." Vex watched as Jack worked, his opinion of humans slowly changing. This one showed no fear, even facing death, and his concern seemed to be for others, not himself. "There," Jack said finally. "Message sent. They'll evacuate the observation teams near the asteroid." Another violent shake. The lights flickered. "What about us?" Vex asked. Jack pointed to a small maintenance craft docked at a side airlock. "Our way out, if we can reach it." More debris fell. A chunk of ceiling crashed onto the console, sending sparks flying. The path to the escape craft was rapidly being blocked by fallen equipment. Jack looked at Vex. Together. For a moment, the crawl commander hesitated. Then he nodded. Together. Back on the station, everyone watching the broadcast held their breath as the asteroid began breaking apart. The challenge had been forgotten. Now they all simply hoped both competitors would survive. The maintenance craft broke free from the asteroid, just as it split into several large chunks. Jack piloted while Vex monitored the failing systems. They watched through the viewport as their challenge arena crumbled behind them. "That was closer than I like," Jack said, setting a course back to the station. Vex nodded, his normally stern face showing what might have been respect. "You handled the controls well." Basic pilot training. All humans get it now. The small craft limped toward the station, carrying the two competitors who had entered as enemies but were leaving as something else. Not quite friends, but no longer rivals. On the station, the Great Hall was packed with beings from every species. They had gathered to witness the conclusion of the challenge, but ended up watching a survival story instead. When Jack and Vex walked in together, a cheer erupted that shook the walls. The head counselor stepped forward. "Never in the history of the Galactic Union have we witnessed such an event." The challenge ended with no clear winner, but perhaps with something more valuable. Jack and Vex stood side by side on the platform. Vex looked uncomfortable with the attention, while Jack simply smiled tiredly. "The trial was inconclusive," Vex stated. "Neither of us reached the central control room first." "Actually," Jack said, "we reached it together. I call that a tie." Murmurs spread through the crowd. A tie had never happened in a crawl challenge before. "And what of your wager?" asked the counselor. "Human membership in the Union. The protection fees." Jack looked at Vex, waiting for his response. The entire hall fell silent. Vex stepped forward. His voice carried easily through the large space. "The human showed unexpected qualities," he said slowly. "Not just physical strength, but other types of strength. When the rocks collapsed, he could have left me. He did not. When the asteroid began breaking apart, he could have saved only himself. He did not." Vex turned to face Jack directly. "On my world, strength determines who leads, but perhaps there are different kinds of strength than what we have measured. The human's words about adaptation have merit." The crowd was stunned. No crawl had ever spoken like this. "I support human membership in the Union," Vex declared. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. "And the protection fees?" prompted the counselor. Vex hesitated, then squared his shoulders. "They will be reconsidered. The crawl will continue to protect Union worlds, but as allies, not masters." The hall exploded with cheers and excited conversation. Centuries of crawl dominance had been transformed in a single day. Later, in a quiet meeting room, Jack sat with Vex, Lori, and several other species representatives. They were discussing the future. "My people won't change overnight," Vex warned. "Many crawl will resist. Change never happens overnight," Jack agreed. "Even on Earth, it took us centuries to learn that cooperation works better than domination." "What do you propose?" asked a representative from a small, timid species that had suffered greatly under crawl taxation. "A combined force," Jack suggested, "with members from all worlds, including the crawl. A team that uses each species' strengths to protect the Union from genuine threats." "Like what?" Lori asked. "There are more stars beyond Union space than within it," Jack said, "and we have no idea what evolved on those worlds. Some may make both Earth and the crawl homeworld look like paradise." Vex nodded slowly. "A wise precaution. My warriors need purpose. Defending against real dangers rather than collecting fees would give them honor." 1 year later, Jack stood on the bridge of a new ship. The cooperative was the first vessel staffed by members of 12 different species, including a substantial crawl contingent. Vex served as security chief, while Jack commanded. Lori headed the science division. "Report ready, Captain," Lori said, handing Jack a datapad. "Thank you, Science Officer," Jack replied with a smile. Their friendship had grown over the months. Vex entered the bridge, his posture still proud but less aggressive than before. "The new crew members are settling in well. Even the ones from worlds we used to collect from." "Good," Jack said. "We'll need everyone working together for this mission." The mission was unprecedented. Strange signals had been detected from beyond known space. The Union Council had unanimously voted to send the cooperative to investigate. "Do you ever regret it?" Vex asked quietly as they stood looking at the stars on the view screen. "Coming to Union space, changing everything." Jack shook his head. Change was inevitable. The old way couldn't last forever. "And the new way, will it last?" Jack watched as humans worked alongside Crawl and a dozen other species on his bridge. A year ago, it would have been unthinkable. "That depends on all of us," he said, "but I like our chances." The ship's engines hummed as they prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel. Ahead lay the unknown, new worlds, new species, perhaps new challenges that would make their past conflicts seem small. Jack gave the order to proceed. As the stars stretched into lines of light around them, he thought about how far they had all come. Not just in distance, but in understanding. Sometimes the harshest worlds produced the strongest bonds.